So this is a small group, so I'm going to make this much less of a monologue about Splunk and more of a conversation. Have you heard of Splunk before? Anyone who's heard of it? Yeah, a couple people. Are the rest of you here because, well, I mean, just, we don't have to go around the room, like we can kind of shout out, but like, who here is in IT, security, anything like that? It is. Is, yes. No, so what groups are, what departments are you in, or what's your role? What's your role in particular, yeah?
So I'm with Internet too.
Okay, oh, okay. Hi, welcome. Okay.
I'm with a research and education network, providing services across the state, trying to figure out the localized issues and how to address them in a more aggregated services way.
Okay, cool. What else? What about you?
I work for John Wiley & Sons.
Okay.
I do digital delivery stuff.
Okay.
Looking to start using data to try to capture students cheating.
Oh, okay. Are you a Splunk customer already?
No.
Okay.
I'm just getting into it. I've just experimented for the past couple weeks with lots.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I am in IT. I oversee podcasting, computer software, things.
I see. Are you a Splunk? Are you guys using Splunk already? No. Okay. What about you?
I am all of IT, including security, infrastructure, apps, servers, etc. Not a current Splunk customer, but an extensive previous job.
Oh, really?
We use Splunk a lot, and
Oh,
I think
good.
I told you the story. I use Splunk to save a life.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So you are, and now you are with you were with
I was
Harvard.
at Harvard, I'm now at Simmons College.
Okay. And so this is a small room, so I'm just pretending like.
George Allen from Justice Center, AVP for operations and customer support. So I oversee data center top services,
Okay.
tech support, network services, television,
Cool.
and the tech support side.
Oh, okay. Cool. And a couple of you, if you've used Splunk before, you know what Splunk is, and you in the back.
So I do business analytics and data reporting. I have on this one.
Okay. We'll start. I'll talk from the slides a little bit. I'll show Splunk a little bit. I should introduce myself. I'm Sandra Ressel, and I'm a sales engineer with Splunk. Before I was a sales engineer with Splunk, I was a Splunk customer. Lots of people who come to work for Splunk were Splunk customers. I was the digital analyst, so a form of a business analyst at National Public Radio, and I used Splunk there for digital analytics. We couldn't effectively count like podcast downloads and break it down by program without welding a bridge each time we wanted to do those kinds of analytics. At that time, this was 5 years ago, I downloaded Splunk. I indexed a day's worth of log files in about 10 minutes. I had reports in about an hour. And those reports were tracking, downloads by minute by program. And that was because I indexed the data into Splunk. I'll walk you through that process. I indexed the data into Splunk. It indexed the entire event. I identified a couple fields in the events. I said, basically through regular expressions, basically like the third tab over, the 2 digits in that third tab over, that's the program ID. Use a lookup table to map that to the program name. And that was all I needed to make a report that we gave to big people. As it happens, though, I was an edge case because most of the time people use, at that time, and still today to some extent, people use Splunk in IT and networking to do things like comb through and collate and analyze large volumes of data, maybe that is structured in a way that no other tool is designed to handle, and find things like cheaters or collaborators. Yeah. Wow. We've even like PC'd that term. Yeah, exactly.
Ambitious collaborators.
In fact, and it's interesting that you mentioned that as a use case because now I'm on the Splunk's higher ed team, which is we've been selling into the higher ed community since our inception, but only in the last about 6 months did we say we need to focus on this. We need to hire in people who have a background in working with higher education. So we have a team. Almost half the team comes from Blackboard, so they know the higher ed space really well. And I can't say that. I'm still learning about what it's like to work with higher ed customers like you guys. But one of our higher ed customers, Ohio State, a huge Splunk customer, they are looking at Splunk for that because they're indexing their Blackboard data and they're starting to use it for, they use it for a ton of stuff, primarily network perimeter security. They have one of the largest, so they claim it, I believe, than one of the largest wireless networks in the country, period. Physically and both physically and from a, and is that your, those of you who are in who are working within a higher ed institution, that seems like a pattern, right? Like you guys have giant wireless networks and you can't really limit who uses them or how. So that has to be challenging from a security perspective. But they're also, they happen to have the Blackboard data in there so they can use that to identify things like people taking tests really fast and getting the test nearly perfect and patterns like that. So I'll actually talk a little bit. So here's the theory behind Splunk, right? Big data comes from machines. I know big data is a phrase that has kind of lost its meaning quickly, but the idea is that even though Splunk itself kind of predates big data as a vogue term, Splunk is kind of, I'm not going to say the best because I'm a little biased, but it's a superb engine for indexing large volumes of machine data with high, so we have customers who index a gigabyte a day. We have customers who index 400 to 500 terabytes a day, right? So we are a superb engine at indexing, bringing in, making searchable, and we'll look at that in a second, what that looks like, large volumes of machine data, data that's coming in at a high velocity, right? That we can handle velocity. The only real limiting factor there is the hardware, the commodity hardware. We work on basically any hardware that you want to throw at it. We also provide a cloud instance with 100% SLA if you want to go that route. Large volume of data at a high velocity, a high variety of data, right? So data coming not just from the usual sources like web servers, et cetera, but from a thermostat, from an app you write yourself and you've written the logs yourself and no other tool can understand it. From APIs, third-party APIs, so the weather. From basically any kind of data source that you as a human could read as words, Splunk can index and read. We can index binary too, but there's no point in it unless you want to search binary, right? Large volume, large velocity, large variety, and large variability, meaning that the events that come in, even from a single source, might be structured differently from event to event. This becomes really important when you're indexing data from a network device that's just spitting out, a log that was designed by somebody 20 years ago, and they haven't changed that. But when something unusual happens, you want to be able to track it. I just saw an event. We have a listserv for higher ed customers, and someone just said, hey, I just found in Splunk, like, Windows servers are suddenly now generating temperature logs, so they just randomly got an event about the temperature of the server, which was useful to help them identify the problem and solve it, right? It came into Splunk, it was readable, they caught it, they understood it, right? Database-based monitoring tools don't help you with that. This is how it ends up being useful, right? So in this case, so let's, I'll use a mouse here if I can no, I can't. Reading from top to bottom, these are 4 different kinds of events. In the commercial world, this might be an e-commerce event. In the higher ed world, maybe this is somebody registering for a course or engaging with the course online, right? 4 types of events. First one, you signed up for the course, right? That's gibberish, except that it's saying, I've ordered, this is the exact time that I've ordered, this is, there's the customer ID, the course ID, et cetera, right? Middleware event is like this software that helped process that, so maybe some LMS, Blackboard or something. Care IVR means something's gone wrong. I, as the student, am calling in about it. In many cases, we have the person that you're calling. There are many customers who use Splunk to allow the support team, the help desk team, to search the logs, to search the activity of that student or that faculty member as they're on the phone with them so they can understand what's going on. And maybe the last one is like they're tweeting about it, right? So the way this works in Splunk world is that the first 3 events all have an ID that's useful that you can search on that ID. You can search on a student name that maps to that ID, so you can immediately bring up those 3 events. And if you've written a dashboard to do such, and we'll look at some that do that, interpret them so that the customer care person can search for that student ID, see everything that they've done, walk them through the process, identify the issue, and not escalate it. Right, in the commercial world, one of our customers is a major cable company who reduced what they call truck rolls, which means reduce the amount of time they had to escalate a help desk ticket to something way more expensive. And I know, a couple of you have mentioned you worked on help desks, right? Same idea. Like these customers were using Splunk to empower the first person that the student talks to at the help desk, empower them with as much information as anybody else has, so that hopefully they can resolve the issue there and not escalate it and make it more expensive, more time consuming. The idea is to break down these different kinds of data so that in any given instance you have as much information as you can to make a decision. Same theory with security, right? We're going to look at our security app in a little bit. Which the theory, and I'm by far not a security expert, so I'm learning it as we're talking about it with customers who are teaching me, right? But what I'm gathering, and you can tell me where I'm off on this, is that basically the name of the game with security is to gather the widest variety of data that you can and identify patterns as quickly as possible. And that's what this is about, bringing the data in, not leaving any of the data on the cutting room floor before you bring it in, making the connections in real time so that you as a human can piece it together and make sense of what's going on. And finally, Twitter, it's like if you're mapping the student ID to someone to their Twitter handle, you can see how they're talking about their experience. So let's talk about, let's just look at Splunk, see how it works. This is an instance of Splunk I'm running just on my laptop. As I mentioned before, I'll just go to Splunk.com. You can go home today and download Splunk, run it on your laptop, index some data, play with it, right, to get a feel for how it works. Same exact version that you would be running in an environment where you are indexing hundreds of terabytes of data a day. The only difference is the volume of data that you're bringing in, right? You download it there, it runs on anything. This one is just running on my laptop. You can index data, index a CSV, index any kind of data that you like. And then you can start searching on it, right? In this instance, we have, this is just, fake data that I've generated for demo purposes. Cisco logs, Kepware, Perfmon, window events logs, Linux logs. But just, I'm logging in, I want to see where something has gone wrong, I can just do fail star. It'll bring up whatever events match that query, fail anything, fail blank, right? This is search bar time range picker. So I can search any time range that I have data for. See the events as they come in. See the variety of events. This happens to be data from a mobile app that we're tracking. So in the cases of higher ed institutions, educational institutions that have a mobile app, we're working with Arizona State, for example, on a mobile app that they have. You can track activity within the app, and they use it. They've been using it for tracking, among other things, where people are logging in on the wireless network, how they're using the app, which parts of the app are they using of the Arizona State app. This is an event from that app. You see there's a failure here. If we wanted to do something really simple, like see who's trying to log into a server and failing, right? Maybe as a way to understand who might be trying to hack into a server. If you're seeing a lot of failed logins over a short period of time. I'm filtering now for a particular type of data, Linux data. And I'm seeing, when I do a down arrow, I'm seeing how Splunk is understanding this data, right? So this is just the raw event. This has been written to a log file somewhere. Splunk is indexing it as it's getting written to this log file. And we've taught Splunk things like this part of the event, that's talking about which app is getting used, is getting referenced. So what I care about is the login app. So now I'm filtering for that, right? Now I'm just seeing events that are part of the login app. And I'm just working against the raw data, no database involved. I could decide, that this is important and extract it as a field and as if I were making a new column in the database and searching against it, right? I can do that on the fly. But here what I want to know is like which users have failed logins over the last 60 minutes, and let's break that down by minute. I'm doing stacked column. Now I have the dashboard, right? I can save this as a dashboard, failed logins. Linux, on the Linux servers. Now I have a dashboard. I can add other panels to the dashboard. I can share the dashboard. I can have the dashboard email people once a week. I can set up an alert that instead of just, getting an email once a week, I learn in real time that there's been, let's do stats count to see how many logins by user. So now I'm seeing the number of failed logins by user, and I can say, if there's more than 10 in 60 minutes, I want to know about it. Per hour, maybe. I can have that running in real time, so I know immediately when it happens. I can schedule this to run once an hour. And I can get an email from it, or I can have it trigger a script itself, right? Or I can have it, when I get the email, include the results with it. Oftentimes people have it trigger a script that resolves the issue in some cases, like if it's finding something like a disk is full somewhere, they can have the script trigger to clear out the disk. Or they can have a script trigger to add it as a support ticket with all of the information around the event, right? I can throttle it where if it's triggering, I get one alert every 60 seconds or every 60 minutes so that my email box isn't filled up. This is core. This is what we call core Splunk. It's just the building blocks, right? The other end of the spectrum is something like this, which all of the building blocks I've shown you are behind this, but this is what a more fully baked app looks like. This is our enterprise security app. An app is a collection of searches, alerts, reports, dashboards, all the things I just showed you really quickly, together, designed together. I think of it like as a box of Legos, where it's like what I showed you were the different Lego shapes and sizes, and now this is like a Lego, Death Star, right? For a specific purpose. The enterprise security app is how we have kind of found ourselves in Gartner's, magic quadrant for security, up against IBM and the kind of the heavy hitters and their security products. Because, I'm interested in hearing what you guys have to say about this, but my understanding of what security is, ultimately is bringing in the widest variety of data possible, identifying patterns as quickly as possible, identifying and reacting to them. Those of you who work in security in one way or another, how would you define the pattern? And how are you using security tools now? What are they like? What are you doing with them? No. Are any of you, so who of you have worked in higher ed security at all? What kinds of tools were you using?
Previous job, we used Splunk.
Oh, really? How did you use it?
It was basically our secure log aggregation for network devices, server, hundreds upon devices.
Right.
Between network servers, data centers. And we were getting into, we didn't do enough, and it was an area of exploration of working with alerting and trending and sort of, I guess, proactive, reactive.
Right.
As opposed to, okay, we know something happened and we're going to go in forensically and figure out what happened well after the case versus having it detect that something's going on. That was kind of that next corner we were looking to turn.
Right. Well, you started with search. I mean, that's where everyone starts. When you were,
and we had a couple people in our organization who were like the Splunk gods and kind of, could make Splunk jump through hoops. And I count myself in this category that not as a Splunk god, but I was very good at using Splunk as a really powerful version of Graph.
Right.
And taking that next, turn this into a dashboard for me and get stuff down.
Right, exactly, right. Yeah, that's where everyone starts. They start with search and then gradually over the course of a few years, or whatever it takes, they start to get more sophisticated with it. And this app here, Enterprise Security, is kind of like, customers are using as kind of a head start for that. So this is where we threw a couple dozen Splunk engineers at Splunk who had a background in security, and they created the searches, alerts, reports, dashboards that they thought would be useful for any security customer. And the way this works is, if you are part of the security team, you log into Splunk, you log into this screen in the morning, and you see how you're doing, right? And you can, modify these. You can get rid of the ones that I tend to like to have just all of the notables up there, right? Notables are, and again, not a security expert. So notables are where known patterns that any security person would know about intersect with your actual data, right? So an access notable is like brute force attacks. That's a pattern that people know about, but when it intersects with your data, it shows up here as an access notable. And you can see things like, here we have a bunch. We have a few that are critical. And we can see in a minute how, of these critical ones, which ones are worth investigating. While it's loading, because we're on Wi-Fi, which is a little bit slow, and we're pulling this from the interweb, so I'm going to show some stuff that's local. For those of you in the room, you mentioned before, you have a little bit of a background in learning in a business analytics. In the higher ed space, we found that customers, here's how the life cycle ends up working. Someone in IT typically will, in IT or security or somewhere in that group, will buy Splunk and use it as like grep on steroids. They'll just bring in a bunch of data. They're looking for broken servers or failures in their network of one type or another. And then they start bringing in the data from the LMS system, right, their learning management system, because they want to understand what's going on when that's breaking, right? And then someone from somewhere outside of IT goes, wait a minute, you have all of the usage data from your LMS system in here, like all of our Blackboard or whatever data is in here. Well, I'm just going to make a dashboard against that same exact data to identify things like which courses seem to be getting the most interest this semester, which ones are getting the most clicks, which ones, how fast are people registering, and what's their average course load, right? How many courses are people registering for? And the interesting thing we hear, specifically for Blackboard customers, is that we just heard that because we have people on the team from Blackboard, is that Blackboard itself has an analytics product, but people still end up using Splunk instead because it's more granular, they can get at exactly what they want to get at, they get the data faster, and they have more abilities within Splunk to do things like create a dashboard for each department to understand how people are engaging with those courses. Someone came by the booth today and asked, and we can totally do this, like within their LMS system, this particular course designer provides videos and other, like, I guess, interactive elements within the course. They don't have any way now to know who's actually watching the videos, right? But with that usage data within Blackboard, we can bring it into Splunk and do a dashboard specifically for that course or for the entire department or whatever. Because we bring in the whole event, we extract the fields, we identify what part of that event matters for that dashboard. We make the dashboard, right? It would update in real time. Yes, sir.
Where does Splunk usually live in the enterprise ecosystem? In front of, behind the firewall?
That's a really good question. Typically, it lives on some server somewhere, or a collection of servers, depending on how much data you're indexing. Typically, I see it behind firewalls because it collects a lot of sensitive data. I see customers, like Ohio State as an example, that it's owned by their IT group. They give logins to the IT groups in each department. And so within the university, different people have access to it. Now, tell me why you're asking, like what?
Well, as a service provider with many enterprises as clients,
Right.
one of the problems we're trying to solve is to offer them what is best labeled as security as a service.
Right.
And establish a level of visibility that would encourage proactive intervention rather than reactive intervention.
Right.
And trying to figure out how, as a service provider,
Right.
Splunk installed in our not
Right.
would be deployable to their environments
Right.
in the areas they care most about.
So we have customers that do that. There's a whole department, as a mere sales engineer, there's a whole department that works with customers for that kind of licensing model. From a technical perspective, you have different options. Like the least complex is you have your own Splunk instance, you give different customers logins, you can silo the data so that they can't ever access someone else's data, if that's a concern. You can limit their searches so that they can only see their data. And you can push out dashboard, like you can make the same dashboard available to everybody, but they just see their data with it, right? That would be the least complex. More complex would be like you're managing individual Splunk instances for each one, but it sounds like even for, yeah, exactly. For your use case, that would be overkill. Like, sounds like the most siloing that you need is just to keep people from being able to access other customers' data. So with that, it would be basically one Splunk instance, each customer's data may be on a different index or however, like there's a lot of different options for siloing out the data. One dashboard that they all log into and see their own data, or a collection of dashboards if you wanted, however you wanted to, their alerts, whatever. But yeah, there's a whole, that does happen. There are customers that do it. There's a whole licensing, a different way to license it and things like that for that purpose. Any other questions, along those lines as we're going along? Let's see if no, it still hasn't loaded. This is always the risk when you're demoing something over the internet at a conference. You never know how your Wi-Fi is going to cooperate. And we're also getting close to running out of time, so I'm not going to rely on this anymore. I'm just going to look at local stuff. You've gotten a little glimpse at enterprise security. It is our gold standard app for security management. And if you want to see more screens, we can talk offline because the Wi-Fi isn't going to work for this, I think. But if we're looking locally, a lot of our higher ed customers are using Splunk for security without using like the high-end enterprise security app. And the way they're doing it are things like just making their own dashboards like you guys did, like just looking at your data, finding the searches that are useful for your data. In this instance, like this is, this is what raw data looks like. We saw that a minute ago. It's coming in real time. In this particular demo, and this is really common, they're indexing these different kinds of data. So everybody is a little bit different, but people typically will index, syslog, they will index logs from the different applications they're running on their network. We have a lot of, surprising to me, amount of like web application logs, web server logs, database logs, etc., web access logs, indexing wire data, NetFlow data. We have an app to capture packet level data. Clickstream data, so data from like Blackboard. And in this sort of canned demo, this is kind of a mishmash of what we actually see in the field. You'll see things like the CIO is seeing that the services that they're offering, they're failing at one level or another. And they're able to drill in and do things like identify the application level, what the errors might be, so errors for a particular application, IT operations, what might be going on, and they're able to drill down. When I look at IT operations, they're able to drill down, in this case, to things like, in this case, they're seeing, their different resources kind of bubbled up to different categories, and they can see things like storage. We're seeing one particular server really oversample for storage all of a sudden, and that same server seems to be oversampling for CPU usage also. We're seeing it's throwing errors from the website. We're seeing applications, the web servers actually seem to be fine, so it's probably not the web server itself, but we're seeing we're pulling in from our Stream app queries to the database, right? And we're seeing one particular query select star from star, which probably shouldn't be happening, right? And so that's a clue, right? We're seeing select star from star, and I'm scrolling down on this particular dashboard. I'm just scrolling down to try to see where that's coming from, right? So you're seeing, where that query is coming from, and what user is triggering that query, right? Pulling in the raw data. In this case, this is from our Stream app. So our Stream app's free. You install it on whatever server you want to capture the packet level data from, and you identify the protocols you want to capture. In this case, we're capturing the MySQL protocol. So you're getting the whole query, the port. You can zero in on what the problem is.
Well, that's how I see it. Your query at the top is using select star from star as a search string, which is as opposed to the actual query select star from star.
Yeah, indeed, and that's creating a problem, isn't it? Like, how do we make that literal? I don't know. That's really funny. You're quite right. It's going to do it all over again. That's really funny. Yeah. I wonder if that would help. No? It didn't kill it, but that's interesting. Yeah, that's really funny. I don't think we've ever noticed that before. But yeah. Yeah, thank you. We appreciate that.
We're awake back here.
You're debugging our demo. The search is more powerful than we need it to be. So that's kind of, and like in this case, and the kind of the fun little part about this demo is like, we're identifying this server's getting blown out because someone's trying to hack in and pull down the entire database, right, which could be troublesome from a security perspective. And at the same time, like in this case, we're Splunking. I'll try to make this a little bit more visible. we're actually splunking temperature sensors from the server room so you can see exactly physically like which server it is, because it's like heating up, right? One of our interns who is at Duke University, incredibly bright guy, noted that like one of the things they're working on, one of the initiatives they're working on at their campus is measuring the carbon footprint of the different parts of the university, and that they could use these kinds of temperature sensors, power level sensors, and Splunk it and measure the carbon footprint of all of their internal infrastructure. Because it's just data, right? And once it's in Splunk, you can make the calculations, that's it. So what else? We just have a few more minutes. Yes, sir.
We're running it locally.
You are.
So we're moving a lot of our apps and whatnot into the hub. Well, what's the best practice in terms of getting a lot of those stuff? We do about, right now, about 40% of our infrastructure accounts in the cloud already. We're going to go up to about 75% by next year.
Right. So typically, I mean, it depends widely on what the app is and things like that, but it generally boils down to one of two things. Like either the app is writing logs somewhere, writing logs to its own server, right? Or it's sending out syslog right across a port. If it's writing logs, even if it's in the cloud, you could install a forwarder on it in the cloud and have it forward data to Splunk. Are some of these apps like software as a service kinds of apps, like?
We're running managed service, Office 365, Google Apps.
Right, Google Apps, right. Right, in those cases, if they provide logs, you can get the logs, right? If they don't, like for instance, we have a really complex app for Amazon Web Services, right, where you can index the usage of AWS itself, including billing and things like that. We have an app for Salesforce. We index our Salesforce data. So if there's a log, then that's great. If not, then you can pull it in. I mean, the last resort, which ends up being useful in these cases, is that you can write a script that will pull down data, and Splunk will index the output of that script, whatever the script is. So people use versions of that to pull data in through an API if your software provides an API, which you mentioned Blackboard and things like that, yeah. I'm sure that if we start, engaging through email or whatever, we can find some other customer that's done it and put you in touch with them. Because it ultimately boils down to like, you monitor, if it's generating logs, then great, that's awesome. If not, then you can listen to a report, and if you can't do that, then at the very least you can write a script that's scraping the data somehow, pulling it into Splunk that way. What else? Cool, well good. Well this is, this is very general. We just kind of ran through the building blocks and how it works. I hope that there's been something that's intrigued you. And like I said, you can go home tonight and, one of the first ways that I used Splunk after I exported the CSV file from my bank, from like my credit card transactions, and I just indexed that into Splunk and did some analytics on that because, it'll accept any kind of data, and that's CSV data typically, so it's structured. It just brings it in, and you can check your balance and stuff like that. Yes, sir.
I have actually another question for you.
Yeah.
Since you guys have participated in Internet 2 and Net Plus and have the exposure to all the campuses that provide feedback on the product.
Right.
The program advisory group and things
Right,
like that.
right.
Have there been any significant enhancements that you've been able to glean from the campuses that are using it? Rolling out or planning on rolling out?
Right, and I should mention Internet 2 and give you guys kind of a great plug because one of the things we did for higher ed customers is the last couple of years we worked with Internet 2 and I don't know how all the business stuff works. I'm just a technical person, but basically it works out like if you are an Internet 2 member, you can buy Splunk through that. The downside is that like the contract you get is the contract you get. The upside is that you get the biggest discount Splunk gives anybody, period, right? Just from being an Internet 2 member. In fact, some customers have become Internet 2 members because the discount they got was larger than their Internet 2 expense, right, membership.
Yeah, I'll just tag on and mention
Yeah.
that is a great benefit of it, but it's really about the integrations of the common federated identity login, delivery of the internet network, and the assurances of cloud control measures, security, accessibility, those kinds of things that the campuses take it through the service automation process. So it's still
Right. Right. And Internet2 has been a great partner. Of those of you who work for higher ed institution, do you know, are you Internet2 members or Harvard? Yeah, you are, yeah. I've just become aware of Internet2 through Splunk, and it's been great. We were at the conference a couple weeks ago at Splunk for it. So cool, awesome. Well, thanks, and like I said, that if you're intrigued, download it tonight and start playing with it, because you can just kind of have fun with it. You use it for free forever if you index no more than half a gig, too. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. Appreciate it.